Coming up on this episode of the Dad Hat Shenanigans podcast.
In our culture, one of the biggest problems is that there's a language game going on, right? Well, I'll redefine marriage, and then now you can't use the word marriage anymore to explain what you mean. Human life in and of itself, all of these things started out with a language game, and then when someone wins the language game, now they control your thoughts because we think in a language. Before I could really understand what was going on, my child was, did a somersault onto the bed, and I freaked out and said, "Baby!" Seeing somebody get shot and immediately respond with fight, that just did something to me. And I realized that there's a lot of things worth fighting for, and I'm not doing a very good job at fighting for them. But then there are very few people who are around to then help you with that. And I always found that to be funny, but also frustrating, because one, I don't like it when people say when they start out with saying how hard it is, because if the context for marriage and parenting is it's really hard, why would anybody do it? If your home isn't set straight, don't expect anything else to be set straight.
Matt, every dad has that story that they love to tell about, it just lights them up when they share about being a dad. What is your dad story?
So I can't share this one very often because it's not always makes sense to talk about. But my wife and I, we had 2 home births for both of our kids. And for my firstborn, I actually got to deliver her. But it was a really crazy story. I won't get too graphic, obviously. And so it's 3 a.m. Friday morning when she was born. And I see the amniotic sac, and I'm waiting for it to break because the fluid is really slippery. But before that happens, my wife pushes, and my daughter pops out, does a somersault onto the bed, and I yell, "Baby!" And before I could make heads or tails, because the amniotic sac had turned brown, but that was my daughter's hair. And so before I could really understand what was going on, my child was, did a somersault onto the bed, and I freaked out and said, "Baby!" And then the midwife and I, grabbed the baby, and everything was totally fine. That's not exactly how I expected to deliver my child, though.
Wow. So just wow. I'm still lost on the home birth. That's so unusual these days, but wow. And I'll ask about that a little bit later.
Yep.
But wow, what a way to enter the world.
Yeah, it was 3 a.m., about 24 hours of labor. And yeah, I was, ready to catch, but she was, I guess, too fast for me.
Gentlemen, I sleep on my pillow. I sleep on my pillow Giza sheets, and with my pillow body pillows to hold my back in place. I have my pillow towels. My wife even wears my pillow slippers. I would never recommend a company I don't personally use. We're proud to have Mike Lindell and MyPillow as the sponsors of our show. You can go to mypillow.com and use promo code TFM, super complicated. That's my parent company, The Fallible Man. Code TFM for up to 80% off your order and free shipping on orders over $75 for our listeners. You're working with a great American company that is employee owned, and you're helping keep the show on the air so we can make more episodes just like this one. Let's get back to it. Welcome to the Dad Hat Shenanigans podcast, the unfiltered truth about being a dad. Real dads, real stories, unfiltered, candid conversations on fatherhood. I'm your host, Brent Dallin, and today my guest is Matthew Jandernoa. Matthew, welcome to the Dad Hat Shenanigans podcast.
Thanks, Brent. Thanks for having me.
Oh, man. So you led us off with an amazing story, and I've got so many questions about that, but we'll get there. Now, as you know, this is the Dad Hat Shenanigans podcast, and we all wear different hats as dads. So tell us about the hat you're wearing today.
Yeah, so I got this hat. It's a Make America Great Again hat, actually. And I got this hat pretty shortly after President Trump was shot. And that was a turning point for me as a husband, as a father, because, putting aside politics, I'm happy to talk about politics, but putting politics aside, seeing somebody get shot and immediately respond with fight, um, that just did something to me. And I realized that there's a lot of things worth fighting for, and I'm not doing a very good job at fighting for them. And so that was a turning point for me. And really got me incredible. I was already convicted, but really convicted that there is a battle going on in this country and in this world, and that we as fathers, especially and as husbands, need to step up and play our part. Um, and that doesn't always look flashy, right? Sometimes it's just not snapping at your wife, but like, yeah, just having those principles and really pursuing something and fighting for a cause. Yeah, that's kind of the story behind the hat. So I bought this hat like just right after that, pretty much.
That was a big day for anybody watching.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of years since someone took a shot at a sitting president on national television. So
Oh, and he
yeah,
wasn't even sitting because he was still running for president.
yeah, yeah. But I
Yeah.
mean, it's been a while. I think someone took a shot at one of the Bushes, but it
No,
wasn't
I don't know.
that
Was
much
it
of a
a shot?
spectacle.
I know Bush Jr. He got a shoot. So he had some stuff thrown at him at a press conference.
I want him. There was an attempt, but it was like
There was
a
okay. Yeah, I
really
don't know.
it was like someone tried to fly a plane into the White House or something, but then they landed on the
Gotcha.
lawn or something. But right, that's not an everyday moment. So regardless
Hmm.
of how you feel about politics, I mean, that was a really big moment to realize, like, wow,
Yeah.
there's a lot of animosity going on right now. So yeah,
Hmm.
it's time for fathers to stand on what they believe on,
Hmm.
uh, regardless of where you stand on that. Because only us leading our families is going to make the country better and the world better.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah,
totally get
and
it.
the yeah, and the thing too is like even Christ, he says, "Be hot or be cold." I spit out the lukewarm. So it's like,
Hmm.
have your opinions, be open to change, but have your opinions.
Hmm. So, Matt, why don't you break it down? We'll get some context here. How many kids do you have? Who are you? What do you do?
Sure. So I have two kids, both under two actually, and I am a Catholic life coach. So I help people to grow in virtue, and I help people to do that kind of in light of their humanity. A lot of people, when they try to develop habits or grow and whatnot, it's really easy to say this is how you grow, and then try to apply it to themselves, as opposed to saying, okay, this is the goal, this is how I operate. How do I get there? Having a more personal approach. I'm coming from Pennsylvania, from Pittsburgh, and yeah, we've been here for a little over a year now. So really enjoy the area. We don't think we're going to stay, just because we have family other places, but really enjoy the area.
Be careful about that.
I know.
I moved my whole life. I grew up. My dad was domestic missionary, and
Hmm.
so we moved every 2 to 3 years my entire life.
Hmm.
Uh, like I was technically born in Oklahoma, but I only lived there for 9 months because my parents were on
Hmm.
their way out at that point.
Sure.
Um, and I lived my whole life that way up until I moved here. I moved here for work. That was 18 years ago.
Wow.
So,
Yep.
right, you got to be really careful when you're like, I don't really think I'm going to stay.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Well, we keep, we'll go back and forth saying, well, we can move back to my family, move back to her family. And then we, get so tired with talking between the two of those places. We're like, well, what if we just stayed here?
Right? It's a lot of work to move, man. People,
Hmm.
people don't always understand how much work is involved with actually moving if they haven't done it a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. And we have this big bookshelf that I built uh for my wife. It's like almost 8 feet tall and like 4.5 feet wide. It's like an oak bush. I hate moving that thing. I love looking at it and I love using it. And my wife loves it too. I get it was a Christmas present, but absolutely hate moving the thing.
Mm, mm. Yeah, no, I can sympathize. I actually used to do freelancing. I was a youth minister, but the church paid me.
Hmm.
I was technically part time.
Sure.
Which translated to I got paid for 20 hours a week. I worked like 60. Uh, because you can't work with 20 teenagers in 20 hours a week. It doesn't work. But we had a couple who owned a, a self storage thing,
Hmm.
and so he had me put a card on his desk, and I would help people either like unload their storage stuff out or load into their storage stuff or move their stuff from their storage to the house that they had bought, where
Mhm.
they just placed it for a short time. And so on top of me moving, I moved a lot of people. Uh,
Mhm.
I hired an 18-year-old kid who wasn't quite as broken as I was to help me with some of the stuff, because some of the furniture people end up with, you're like, why didn't you just burn that with the house when you left, man?
Mm.
Just
Mhm.
I built in a bookshelf here for my wife, and I told her, it was like, no, it's now part of the wall. It's like I built it in place. It's not built to go anywhere with us.
Mhm.
Uh, she's like, but I said, look, I built you a couch table. I've got one of those little tables behind our couch that keeps it off the wall.
Mhm.
I built that. I built you a coffee stand. Our turtle
Mhm.
enclosure. We have enough big furniture. It's
Yeah, and if you really need to, you'll build something again.
right. Yeah, exactly. I can always buy more wood and do some work.
Mhm. Yeah, that's not a
Moving
hard
it,
thing to do. Yeah.
moving is not always worthwhile. Matt, what is your favorite thing about being a dad?
Honestly, so, I don't know if I could really say my favorite because there's so many things, but when I was thinking about it, it's really it's like being able to interact with my kids more. um, as they get older, and then you can kind of see them behind their eyes, if you get what I mean,
Mhm.
and they can see you, and there's like an interaction. Absolutely love that. My daughter and I, um, she can hardly pick up the pillow, but we have pillow fights, and like I get home from work and I come from I come from upstairs to downstairs because I work from home, but I'll go on the couch and I'll throw a pillow at her, rough enough for it to knock her up a little bit, but not hard enough where it hurts her, obviously.
Mhm.
And she'll fall back on the couch, she'll laugh, and then she'll pick it up with everything in her and just like stumble over to me and then fall on me with the pillow. And I just absolutely love that. Such a fun thing to come home to, so to speak. But yeah, just interacting with them.
What was the best piece of advice you were given before you became a dad?
So it's hard to say. Like I have an answer, but the reason why I preface it with that is that a lot of people, when becoming married, becoming a dad, a lot of people, would say to me, "Oh, you'll understand when," and that was a prevailing theme. You'll understand when you're engaged, or you'll understand when you're married. You'll understand when you have kids. You'll understand when you have two kids. You'll understand when you have five. Yeah, I'm just like, when I still don't understand. Little things like, um, I don't know, not being able to do certain things that you wanted to do, or whatever it might be. Uh, yeah, just different pieces of advice. So I think that the really the biggest piece of advice that I was given, was ongoing advice from my dad. He instilled in me the importance of a personal relationship with Christ and the value of study. And so growing up, I'd wake up and see my dad praying every morning. And sometimes it'd be really annoying because it was by the TV and I wanted to watch Saturday morning cartoons or whatever. Uh, but, that really instilled in me that if I want to be the best father and the best husband, I need to have a good prayer life, and I need to be grounded in Christ. Um, and also to the value of study. So my dad loves books. He has so many books. Probably it's a endearing quality about him, but also a pet peeve of my mom, that he has so many books. But yeah, just the value of study, and yeah, kind of questioning and learning. Um, but yeah, no, that daily, like, dude, that daily prayer life, it, like, I notice when I don't pray in the morning, I notice, and it, and not in a bad way, but it blows my mind when people like don't have a solid prayer life. Not because I think they're anything less, but I'm just like, dude, how do you like continue to develop as a person and grow and like be grounded? Um, yeah, I don't know. Christ is everything to me. So,
It's amazing how many people get a slew of advice, right? You
mhm.
share you're going to be a dad for the first time, and like everybody has an opinion, and the majority of advice that people give you is completely worthless,
Yeah.
because it's either makes no sense and you're just like on the nose of it, like, really? That just doesn't even crack.
Hmm.
Or it's things like that. It's like, well, blah blah blah, but you'll see when you get there. Yeah, that helps. Thanks, man. Yay.
Yeah. Well, and in a lot of like my wife and I will talk about this. So many people are happy to tell you how hard marriage and parenting is, but then there are very few people who are around to then help you with that. And I always found that to be funny, but also frustrating because one, I don't like it when people say when they start out with saying how hard it is, because if if the context for marriage and parenting is it's really hard, why would anybody do it? Right? Obviously, there are challenges, but I find way more value when you say, oh my gosh, it's the best decision I ever made. This is why. And there's going to be hard things, and talk about it in the context of it being a good thing. But so many people start out with saying it's really hard, and I'm like, how is that supposed to be helpful to me?
How long have you guys been married?
We've been married, not terribly long. So maybe I don't know yet because I'm not there yet. But a couple, 2023. Yeah, there you go. So just a
Okay.
couple of years. Yep.
Hey, we are 24 and a half years in.
Wow. Praise God.
Still the best choice I ever made is my
Yeah.
wife. Uh,
Hmm.
I am grateful every day that God pulled us together, and we work every day at it, but still the best choice. Yeah.
Hmm.
There are hard days, but anybody who thinks that they can connect with somebody and like share a life with somebody without
Hmm.
any kind of work involved
Hmm.
doesn't understand any kind of relationship. But
Hmm.
absolutely best choice, best decision of my life.
Hmm.
I thank God every day for my wife because
Hmm.
I couldn't have made this work with anyone else. Like it's so yeah, sure, it's hard, but there you go. 24 years in, I'm looking forward to the next 24 years, man. Uh, we're actually doing a marriage enrichment class at our church
Oh,
right now
cool.
because we prioritize doing at least one a year
Hmm.
just as a regular part of the maintenance on our marriage,
Hmm.
right? Uh, so
Do you find much like resources for married couples? Because some of that myself and a lot of people that I talk to, it's like there's not tons of stuff for married couples. I don't know what your experience is, but
it really depends. From if you're a person who's deep into their faith, right?
mhm,
A lot of churches will have more option than the
mhm,
secular world does. Uh, if you're coming at it from a purely secular base, which is always makes marriage more difficult, there is, but it gets buried. Like it's really
yeah,
hard to find good resources that aren't faith based. So I think it's
mhm,
a lot harder for non faith based individuals
yeah,
to find good resources. I make a lot of relationship content on my other podcast
mhm,
because if things aren't right there in that relationship,
yeah,
if your relationship with your spouse, if your relationship with your children at home, that those at home core relationships and your closest friends,
mhm,
all of life is much harder.
mhm.
Like everything is much harder.
Everything. Well,
So I
yeah,
try to focus there.
if your home isn't set straight,
Mhm.
don't expect anything else to be set straight.
So I make a lot of content there for that because I that's where all my strength comes from.
Mhm,
Like as long as I'm taking care of those things the rest of my life, I feel like I can go like, slay giants. Uh I'll tell you a great resource, a shameless plug. My dear friend, I've known him for years, Oliver Marcel, runs the Relationship Trade Secrets podcast with his wife,
mm,
Denise. They do marriage enrichment seminars. They travel talking
mhm,
about marriage. This is what they started doing it as a blog years ago and have been doing it ever since. Like they're one of my favorite resources. I go and listen to
mhm,
their podcasts and their YouTube
mhm.
channel
That's cool.
because they are a faith-based couple, but that's not the center part of the conversation because they know
Mhm.
they're talking to a lot of people who don't necessarily have a faith-based relationship. And
Yeah,
so
that's
they
always
have
hard.
just real honest conversations and really great material. Like I love to listen to their show. If I'm
Mhm.
feeling like my wife and I aren't clicking, I jump over to their YouTube channel. So Shameless plug, relationship trade secrets. You'll find it under Denali LLC.
Well, that's why I think it's so important to treat like your marriage and your relationship with your kids as a level of like school and learning,
Mhm.
because and that's one of the things too is people like I have a lot of opinions about marriage and family and parenting and stuff. And one of the things that would happen is I would express them and people would say, "Oh, you'll understand when," right? That's kind of where that would come in. And
Yeah.
so, but the problem with that is that, oh, so a lot of the times when I talk, most of what I say are half-baked thoughts. And so it's there's something in my brain that I want to get out, and then I say something that's a little bit more convicting sounding, or whatever it might be. But then people will take it as, oh, this guy is just hard set in his opinion, and it's going to be a hard day for him when that doesn't come to fruition.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of what I mean by school is like, real school, if you think really about classically speaking, education is a form of leisure. And leisure is when you do something that you enjoy for its own sake. And so if you treat your relationships like school, like leisure, then you're not trying to get anywhere per se, but you're saying, how can I enjoy this for its own sake? And how can I be totally present in it? And so obviously I'm going to bring my own opinions. If you don't have any, then you're not going to be a very good husband or father, because how the heck else do you make decisions if you don't have opinions? But if you treat it like school and like leisure, then that means there's a level of softness that you can, or willingness to change your opinion when something changes.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I think that one thing that a common struggle is when people make up their own opinion and then take that to their spouse or take that to their parenting, instead of having an opinion and then discussing or openly sharing with their spouse, if that makes any sense. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, yeah, no, I get it. And it's a growing thing, with a
Mhm,
couple. One of the, I think, big things that sinks a lot of relationships is people don't allow for the fact that you're not the same person you were when you married
mhm,
her,
mhm.
right? My wife and I are very different people than we were 24 years ago.
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, there are some things that have endured, of course, but people are like, oh, well, they're just a different person. Well, how long you been together? 10 years. Yeah, I hope they're a different person. And we
Mhm,
don't allow for that, right? We fall in love with an ideal
mhm.
instead of a person.
Yeah.
And so once you start to process and go, hey, it's like a tree, right? It grows over time. And if I'm growing with it and nurturing with it, then we're good. That's healthy.
Mhm,
But that allows for growth, that allows for change, that allows for my opinion's going to change and I'm going to have different ideas. And to make that work, we have to do it together, right? A tree
mhm.
doesn't, one root doesn't grow this way very often unless you live in Washington State, and that happens all the time. But our trees grow around other dead trees all the time. So they get split, but you're still connected, right? It's still, this has to work together.
Mhm,
And so couples start to get this split, and this person are still in love with the person who started it with
mhm,
them.
mhm,
And you don't realize, like, no, we have to keep talking. We have to keep sharing ideas. We have to keep sharing vision. We have to keep sharing
mhm,
conversation every day.
mhm,
Or I don't hard like my wife. My wife respects me biblically and lets me have the final say on things
mhm.
because she submits to the fact that, and people hate that word, at least women hate that word, because they don't understand. It's an act of love. She believes that
Mhm,
I am doing the very best and will
mhm,
choose and put our relationship, our kids, our
mhm,
family as the priority with every decision. And
mhm,
so I always listen to what she has to say about things, but she'll yield the final answer to me, trusting that I'm going to lead us.
mhm,
I worked hard to earn that. I have not always been perfect, and I've gotten a lot of
mhm,
grace from her, but I work every day to have that belief in me.
mhm,
Um, but I want to, but on the other hand, I'm also very quick to ask, like, hey, what's your opinion on this? Hey, what's
mhm,
your thoughts on this? I want to know because she's my partner and she sees things I don't, and she thinks a different way than I do. And that's amazing. And so, like, when it comes to raising the kids, we didn't agree on everything. We haven't agreed on
Sure.
everything,
Yeah.
right? We've definitely had our own opinions based on our
Yeah.
lives. Uh, and so there's been a lot of give and take on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, I thought we were gonna no. Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, maybe we should talk about this because
Yeah.
I totally saw this going a different way. Uh, that's generally where the fights happen, is when you stop listening to each other.
Right. But even with that, if you think about it as like a business, if there are two decision makers in the sense of two people who have the final say in a business,
Mhm.
that business is never going to go anywhere because just pragmatically, someone has to have the final say.
Yeah.
And it's and most couples, because I actually do an engagement mentorship, so couples who are engaged to be married, like there's a I don't think that the church offers enough for engaged couples, and so I wanted to step in and help. But one of the things that I work with them is helping them to realize, okay, it's the whole idea of headship and a final decision maker is specifically for the times when there's a disagreement. Because if you agree, you agree. So there's no, you don't need a final say person. It's
Mhm.
specifically for when you disagree. And so I think that a lot of couples go in with a little bit with rose-colored glasses, rose-tinted glasses, and they go in and they say, "Oh yeah, my husband has the final say." But then if you look at how they handle discussions, oh well, when we disagree, you know, the wife gets her way. And I'm not saying it's wrong, obviously, for the wife to ever get her way, obviously, because like you said, you have different purviews, you have different responsibilities in the relationship. And so, like kids, for example, and educating them and whatnot, I 99% of the time, I defer to my wife's judgment because that's just, if you think about it, a business, that's just smart business, right? You delegate things that you aren't very good at, or don't know enough about, or you just don't have the time for, right? So, but even that whole approach comes from viewing marriage as a covenant, right?
Mhm.
As a covenant is between two persons, right? And it's gift of self to the other person, and it's an exchange of persons in some way. Whereas a contract is an exchange of goods and services. And so if you view marriage more like a contract, well, then yeah, that would make total divorce makes total sense, because you're agreeing to goods and services, and because the person changes, the way that they do things is going to change, or their opinions about things is going to change. But
Mhm.
if you have that agreement and that understanding of, no, I'm receiving you completely and totally, and I'm giving of myself completely and totally, then that's what actually creates for lasting marriages, because you fundamentally understand that you are going to change, and I want you to change because I love you and I want to live life with you. And more than that, I understand that it's a promise to God, um, also for the sake of the children, right? Like
Mhm.
even if I ever wanted to leave my wife, I wouldn't, at the very least, for the sake of my kids, at the very least, right? Um, but there's so much more to it than that. But I think that we can often forget that kids is kind of an integral part of the marriage. The Lord said, "Be fruitful and multiply." And so, ironically, if we divorce marriage from parenting, um, then I think we don't have a proper understanding of what marriage actually is meant to be.
I don't think you can separate marriage from parenting necessarily. I mean, I know, and there are people right now who are unhappy because we're saying this. It's going to be part of it, even if you're
Mm.
divorced, right? Uh,
Yeah.
I have friends, I have family who have ended up in divorces. Guess what? They still have to interact with their ex-wife, or
Hmm.
and it still has a toll on the kids. It still
Hmm.
impacts the kids, and so you can say it doesn't, but it does, right? It's
Yeah.
all that marriage relationship, whether it ends or stays, is going to have an impact
Hmm.
on your children, on the way your children live in the future, on the way children. I had a conversation on my other show with a guy who specifically works with adult children of divorce.
Mm.
They work with, people. He works with people after they're adults to look at, how their parents' divorce affected them
Mm-hmm.
now as an adult. How is it affecting their relationships now? How is it impacting the way they look at relationships or they experience
Mm-hmm.
relationships? And even gray divorces where the kids were already adults and then their parents got divorced afterwards,
Yeah.
right? So you can't separate, right? It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
work. My
Mm-hmm.
daughters are learning what to expect from a man with the way I treat their mother.
Absolutely.
It's just a fact. They're learning what to expect from a man by the way I live my life. And so I take that as a personal challenge to, try to
Mm-hmm.
become Superman.
Mm-hmm.
Not always hitting that one, but
Mm-hmm.
it's what drives me every day. It's like, okay, I have to set the bar so my daughters never bring home a bonehead.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Right.
If dad can do all this, or if dad is this way, that like it raises the bar on the chances of who they're going to bring home to introduce to
Uh-huh.
me.
Yeah. Well, and I think that really, ties in with the idea of virtue. So quick context, I used to have a sour taste in my mouth when I heard the word virtue. And the reason for that is because I misunderstood it as, like there are four cardinal virtues, for example, and I thought that people just picked them for no reason, or just said, hey, we should have something to guide us. Let's pick four, kind of arbitrary.
Mm-hmm.
But really, what virtue is the habitual disposition to do the good, meaning it's a heart posture towards the good. And so it's not behavior, although behavior is a result of it, you know? And so here's a quick question. So there are four cardinal virtues. Do you know why there are four cardinal virtues?
No.
Okay. Most people don't. I didn't know this until I learned it. But so the four cardinal virtues are prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. Okay. So if you think back to, so the virtues in this way, the four cardinal virtues were first introduced with Plato's The Republic, and then really explained a lot more by Aristotle, and then more people in the Catholic world. St. Thomas Aquinas really, Christianized it. But either way, the reason is because if you were to divide the human experience into four categories, it would be your thoughts, your desires, your fears, and your actions/interactions. Okay. How do we think well? Prudence. How do we desire well? Temperance. How do we manage our fears well? Fortitude. How do we act and interact well? Justice. So when I learned that, I was like, oh, this isn't like some sophisticated, behavior set, but rather it's no, how do I flourish as a human being? Because if you were to say, hey, would you want to have well-ordered thinking that promotes your flourishing and brings about the good? Everybody would say, well, yeah, absolutely. Right. But then if you start saying prudence or these other names of virtues like temperance, a lot of people have a sour taste in their mouth or don't really know what they are, and think it's just about a certain behavior set. When in reality, the only behavior focused one is justice. And that's because if you don't interact well with other people, you're not going to have a flourishing life. And, how does that play into parenting and marriage? Well, uh, I've discovered recently there's this thing called the four tendencies. I don't know if you've heard of it before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Gretchen Rubin, she I don't know where her day job is, but she's an author of a number of books, and she, long story short, interacting with some people, found that some people are very self-motivated and other people are not. And she was asking the question, why is that? And so she did a lot of research. I want to say it was like 1 million people, but if it wasn't, it was tens, hundreds of thousands of people, a lot of people. And what she found is that everyone kind of went into four categories, and it was based on how we respond to expectations. So there's external expectations and internal expectations. So you have the upholder who readily responds to internal expectations and external expectations, kind of a very balanced person in that way. Self-motivated, but happy to do things for the people if they ask them to do it. Then there's the questioner who, readily responds to internal expectations, but questions all external expectations. So if it makes sense to them, they'll do it. But if it doesn't, then it takes a lot of willpower to get themselves to do it, if they do it at all. And there's the obliger, who is very other motivated. So they're not self-motivated. They, can't really follow through on their own expectations for themselves. But if somebody else has an expectation for them, it's very easy for them to do it. So you think about if you were on a track team in high school and you were running all the time, super easy for you. Then you get out of high school and you're like, why can't I run? I want to run, but no one is expecting me to run, so I don't run. Right. So that's kind of an obliger. And then there's the rebel, who rebels against all expectations, does not like being told what to do, really values kind of freedom and doing what we want. So I actually would find myself in the rebel category. And what's really cool is that as I'm studying the 4 tendencies and I'm studying the 4 cardinal virtues, what I found is that they actually overlap, and that each tendency is fertile ground for a particular virtue. So the upholder, fertile ground for the virtue of temperance, because temperance is being as balanced desire, and upholders are generally balanced people. They don't really get sucked into things very much, so they're fertile ground for the virtue of temperance. Questioners, they question things, they want to know things, so they're fertile ground for the virtue of prudence, which is about seeing reality as it is, practical wisdom, that kind of thing. The obliger is fertile ground for the virtue of justice, because justice is quite literally a framework of external expectations about how you act and what's right and what's wrong and all that kind of stuff. And it's other focused. And then the rebel is fertile ground for the virtue of fortitude, because whenever you rebel, you're fighting something. And whenever you're practicing courage, you're fighting against something, and, you're standing up for something. So when I realized this totally changed my coaching, because if you want to develop a habit, you need to figure out what actually motivates you. Are you motivated by things that make sense and reason? Are you motivated by being a balanced person? Are you motivated by helping other people and, making sure that other people are happy or other people are okay? Or are you motivated more so by, a cause, freedom, the rebel, for example? And so when I've realized that and I incorporated it into my coaching, it was the coolest thing, because, when I'm coaching an upholder, it doesn't take tons of desire to get them to do something, because they can readily do things that they want to do. But what that means, though, is that they haven't dug deep to know what their biggest desires in life are. And so I asked him, I was like, dude, have you ever asked yourself, like, what do you want in life? What do you want most in life? And he's like, no, like, I've never needed to. Things come pretty easily to me. Whereas, for him, so it's like, okay, you need to go talk to your family and your friends, ask them what they see in you, what they see you becoming, and experiment, try things out, But the rebel, because there's a huge disparity between what happens and what they want, because they can't get themselves to do it. And for me, right, there's a huge awareness of what I want in life, because I don't get it very often, because I'm always striving or struggling for it. So when I coach a rebel, it's very much about, okay, it's about becoming a certain kind of person and less about achieving a certain goal. Because once it becomes a goal, it can become an expectation, and then we don't want to do it anymore. But rather, if it's about becoming a certain kind of person or fighting for a particular cause, that's very motivating. So, I'm kind of rambling a little bit when it translates to parenting and marriage. So my wife is an obliger and I'm a rebel. So one of her biggest frustrations is that I never seem to be able, not never, it's a strong word, but it's hard for me to just do the thing that's asked of me, to just do it, right? So she always gets frustrated, like, why can't you just do the thing? Whereas for me, it, a frustration for me is that she very much relies on me expecting her to do things. Whereas I hate expectations. And so when we realized this as a couple, that was a game changer, because it's so easy to build up resentment in marriage when you don't understand your spouse and how they function, how they are motivated by things. So for her, it's like, again, we love each other very much. That's the context. But thoughts can cross her mind of like, wow, he's just lazy, or he's just not motivated, or he's selfish. Whereas for me, it's like, geez, like, why can't she just do the thing that she wants to do? Like, why does she always have to, be so communal about it and not just be an individual who wants her own things. Um, so when we recognize that, we can actually fight against that resentment and actually develop in relationship and grow with each other, and love each other even more.
I think part of the translation on that is we don't have some of that in modern language.
Mm-hmm.
And as modern language changes, it becomes people automatically resist, I hate to say old words, right? Prudence is not something you'll hear in common society,
Right.
right? You're not going to hear those words that we use for the virtues. And so there's immediate turnoff in the I think I may be in one of the last generations that actually heard those words in like normal use still.
Mm-hmm.
You hear justice, but that's about it.
Yeah.
Right. So
Which
the
that would make sense because that's how we interact with each other. And that's
right.
never not an
Well,
never
and
not an issue.
you hear it taken out of context a lot too, but
Right.
you don't hear prudence or fortitude. Some of those we've used words to describe those virtues, but we
Mm-hmm.
don't actually have a more modern context for that word. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
times people will try and say, grit or something like that for
Mm-hmm.
fortitude. Uh, and so I think when you talk about those things, people there's automatically a disconnect
Mm-hmm.
because you get from the millennials down going, that's one of those old words, like boomers use that word, or, uh, my parents are boomers, so I laugh about
Same.
that.
Same.
But you don't hear those modern words, and then so we have a complete disconnect from how those impact our relationships, impact
Mm-hmm.
us as fathers, impact us as husbands. Uh, because it's just like, why are you using some old dusty word no one talks about, right? And then actually getting people to understand. I love like personality assessments and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that because they can tell you so much about people. And so I've read part of the study you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Not I haven't gone in depth on it, but I'm constantly looking for uh, data points and information and insights on people, and so I've familiar with some of her work. I didn't know who did it, but I am
Oh,
familiar with
sure.
a little bit of it. Um, but my wife and I grew up in a time when like there were more personality tests going
Mm-hmm.
on, different people doing it. Uh, so I always saw the value in finding those personality points because it helps like my wife and I connect.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we understood each other earlier on in our relationship because we had both done some of the same
Yeah.
personality assessments in the churches and stuff. Um, it's like, oh, you're one of those, aren't you? Okay, now I totally get it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think it would help a lot of relationships. I look at my children, like my brain filters people that
Yeah.
way. I look at my children based on personality assessments that I'm comfortable with that I've used and I'm more familiar with, and go, oh, she's an otter. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's a golden retriever. Okay, I got that right. We're sorting them out. I don't know what it was. Like there was a string in the '90s where personality assessments they used a lot of animals.
Sure.
My wife's an owl. I'm a lion. Like it's
Love it.
I don't know why that was the thing then in the mid '90s, but that was the habit with at least some of them. But so I look at that, right? I also filter people through love languages, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the first filters I use when I meet somebody is I'm like, okay, what is this person's love language? How do they understand this? Because it helps me communicate with them better.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so there's a lot of value in applying those things, I think, as a father,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if you guys aren't familiar with what he's talking about, this is one of several personality exams out there that is possible that you can actually start to filter people through, but
Mm-hmm.
it will help you with
Mm-hmm.
your marriage relationship. It will help you understand your children. It's really funny
Mm-hmm.
when you have kids and you start to see it because you're like, if you know you and you know your spouse and you go,
Mhm.
how did that happen? Right?
Yeah.
It's like multiplying negative numbers. You know, certain things shouldn't happen. Like, wait,
Yeah.
this plus this does not equal this. How did that happen? Right.
Mhm.
And that's when you really start to pick up. It's like, oh, my kid has their own very unique personality. They inherited some of it, but they have their own unique personality coming out.
Mhm.
So you use the virtues in your counseling to help filter and help other people understand
Yeah.
alongside this.
Yeah. Well, and I think it really it ties nicely in with what is the goal of parenting in particular, but I think it's extrapolated to a lot of other things. You know, what is the purpose of the human life? What is the purpose of development? What is the purpose of marriage? All this kind of stuff on a human level. Um, it actually answers, you know, because a lot of people, especially younger generations, really want an answer to that question. Like, what actually is the purpose of parenting? What actually is the purpose of a lot of things? And again, to go back to Aristotle and to philosophy, uh, we all have two types of appetites. Okay, so your sense appetite, which is what you're motivated to do and drawn to based on your senses, right? So something smells good, something smells bad, something tastes, you know, all that kind of stuff. And then the other appetite is your intellectual appetite, what you're motivated to do and drawn to based on what you reason to be good. And so that actually is called the will. So when most people think about the will, they think of willpower. You know, I just got to, you know, grit, just will my way through it. When in reality, it's actually an appetite that, you know, when you choose to do something, you do it because you think it's good, right? And so the goal, the purpose of parenting is to cultivate your child's will. So we know a lot, and particularly in Christian circles, we understand that as, okay, I need to educate them in the faith. I need to tell them what's right, what's wrong, and what's good in that way. What it also includes, though, is your sense appetite actually can affect your intellectual appetite, right? So your senses can affect your will. So, for example, in extreme cases, addicts, right? Um, if you're addicted to something, your perception of reality is warped. And so what you think is good is different, probably in some cases, than what is actually good. And so this is when it also, you know, brings in like candy and junk food and screens and all this other stuff. Because as a Christian parent, if you think prayer is important, uh, and you want your kid to pray, but they're always hopped up on sugar, they're always watching TV, they're on your phone, whatever it is, right? How do you expect them to sit still for 15 minutes, let alone want to do that? And so that is like, you know, the goal or the purpose of parenting is to cultivate their will so they can be a fully functioning, flourishing human being that can actually say yes to the good. You know, not only do they know what's good, but also have the capability to say yes to that. And I think that young people especially want to know what is the purpose of parenting. And you asked me a different question, and I kind of forgot what that question was. I was going to tie it back in. What was the question you asked me again?
That you're using virtues
Yeah.
in
Okay.
your counseling.
Yeah. So that's the goal, right? Is particularly my coaching as well. Okay, how can I step into that parenting, so to speak, and help them to see the good and be capable of pursuing the good? So because we don't have a good understanding of the virtues, a great example is I'll coach a number of guys who struggle with, you know, pornography and masturbation. They all think more often than not that they need to grow in temperance, right? There's this desire and I need to stamp it out. I need to rein it in, that kind of stuff. But what I actually find is that a lot of my clients need to grow in the virtue of prudence, because if prudence is how to think, if we think well, most of the time, you know, the guys don't have like a desire for it in the sense that they want it in their life. You know, they're coming to me because they don't want it in their life, but really they struggle with handling the thought or the temptation when it comes into their brain. And so that's actually prudence. So one of the sub virtues of prudence we work on is alertness, being fully aware of the situation. Again, what guy, you know, what man doesn't want to be fully aware of the situation, you know, being prepared or, you know, being aware of all the intricacies and whatnot. And so a way that we do that is when you have that temptation or an intrusive thought, it can cause you to be anxious. And when you're anxious, you have tunnel vision. And so you're only looking right here. You're not able to be fully aware of the situation. So it's a tool I call it distracting from the distraction, where the idea is the tempting thought comes, and instead of being, you know, pushed into this one direction of thinking, you say, hey, wait a minute, what else is about that thing? So an example that I use is there's a beautiful woman in a red dress that pops into your mind. You can either be alert to the woman or you can be alert to the red dress. Very different trains of thoughts, we know the train of thought with the woman, but red dress. Oh, what else is red? Apples are red. Apples taste good. They're pretty sweet. Jolly Ranchers. And then you just distract yourself from the distraction. So the idea is to keep those thoughts going. And so many of the guys, they're like, one guy in particular was like, dude, this is the this is the first thing that's ever actually been helpful before. And I think that's because virtue in reality is very personal, because each person grows in virtue a little bit differently, because each person has a different motivating structure. Each person cares about things a little bit differently. And so if I can help them to understand what they care about, what motivates them, then that means I can help them to grow in virtue in light of that, as opposed to just saying, no, you just got to do X, Y, and Z. You just got to, do the thing. Um, so I kind of like to call it as well, like your champion virtue, the virtue that that comes more naturally to you, the one that if you want to grow in that one, that motivates you to grow in the other virtues. And take a more human, personal approach. And I think that's something that's also lacking in our culture, but also in the church. I don't think that we take a personal enough approach to growing in virtue and holiness.
I think you need to start work on renaming the virtues.
Yeah,
just a personal opinion. I think you need to work on as you continue in helping men with this. I think you need to work on renaming the virtues into a. Hold on. Sorry, I just got an alert on the system. It looked like it stopped the recording. Oh, that was scary for a minute. I was like, wait, no. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So yeah,
renaming the virtues. Yeah,
I think that would benefit you as you're working with more and more men, especially as it transitions, right? Because prudence is just not a word we understand at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you were raised reading the King James, prudence is not a word that gets used in common society. And the more we separate ourselves from certain language, the harder it is for us to hold on to that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's got to be a modern equipment or something that will just a personal thought.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, I think it's important for that. And that's even why modern authors are important. Not because we haven't written about most things already, but again, like you said, some words fall on deaf ears. Modern ears, our terminologies are very different, especially with technology and the internet. The progression of the English language took a hard left, with all of the slang and the texting lingo and all that kind of stuff. So I completely agree with it. I think it's important. And that's even something that I've thought about. It's like, okay, what are some terms that are more like, low key, like new agey, edgy things that are like, whoa, I haven't heard that one before. Or, whoa, that sounds really cool. But then I think it needs to be an avenue back to the to that kind of language, because I think that's in our culture one of the biggest problems is that there's a language game going on, right? Well, I'll redefine marriage, and then now you can't use the word marriage anymore to explain what you mean. Now you have to use other term, or gender, or all of these things, right? Human life in and of itself, all of these things started out with a language game, and then when someone wins the language game, now they control your thoughts, because we think in a language. So if we start thinking, if certain words mean different things, that affects our thoughts, and our thoughts affect our desires and our behaviors. So I agree with you, but I think it's also necessary to use that to bring them back to what to what prudence actually is, because I think that does that make sense?
Well, so I don't want you to change the word
Yeah.
and the meaning, because I agree 100%. it pisses me off to no end. I got in a semantical argument with a guest one time because he's trying to argue is like, well, you know, I had an experience with God. It doesn't mean that I believe in God. It's like you can't have an experience with something you don't believe in. Like you can't.
Or that's something that doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah. You cannot say in one breath, I had an experience with a higher power, and then tell me in the same breath that I don't believe in a higher power.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand? This doesn't work. Like,
Yeah.
well, that's the way you define it. No. There's a definition. You do understand. He had never actually seen a dictionary, which blew my mind. I felt
Seriously.
really, really old in that conversation. I was like, you had a really poor education, dude. Like, there is a dictionary that actually defines these things. That's the way language works. If we can't all agree on a word and what it means, we
Mm-hmm.
can't actually communicate. No, I don't want to get rid of it entirely,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
you almost need like an entry level word, something that means the same thing that is a little more modern that you can use at the entry level into
Mm-hmm.
that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And as they open up more to it, then you can use the full words.
Yeah. No, that's a good idea. That makes a lot of sense. And I think, like, frankly, even just from a business marketing level,
Yeah.
if I, for temperance, for example, if I say how to become a more balanced person,
Mm-hmm.
that is going to draw a lot more eyes than how to become a more temperate person. Because again, when you hear the word temperate, you think, oh, how do I desire less? How do I rein it in? When in reality, it's about how do I desire well? And what's really cool is that one of the sub virtues of temperance is called the eutropelia. It's a Greek word, and it's leisure. Most people wouldn't put temperance and leisure in the same category, but it is, because if you think about work and play, what is the easiest way to
Mm-hmm.
temper your desire for work, to increase your desire for play, for leisure? What's the best way to temper your desire for leisure? To work, you know? Um, and so that's the thing with temperance. It's about becoming a balanced person where your desires are pulling you evenly
Mm-hmm.
and you're not being dragged one way or the other. But I no, that makes total sense. I think balance even would be a good word for temperance.
Right. Just something at an entry level.
Yeah.
When I used to work with teenagers, I was a youth minister. I had the translations of the Bible that I go, yes,
Hmm.
I reviewed how these were translated. I like these. I'm okay with these.
Hmm.
I feel like, they're pretty close. But I had the version of the Bible I used for a kid who was coming from the outside who had never been to church in this age range or this age range based on where their education should be,
Hmm.
right? But also, I'd never been exposed to church lingo. And then I had the Bibles I used with my kids who were born, bred, and raised in the church,
Yeah.
right? To get rid of certain terminology just for that, right? I didn't want the meaning to change. But, if I
Yeah.
sit here and tell dads, like, you need more temperance and prudence in your life, there are fathers listening right now who are, below the age of 30 going, I'm sorry, what? What is,
Yeah.
I never even heard those words.
Hmm.
Temperance has something to do with temperature, right? We
Yeah.
just, unfortunately, the English language has lost some amazing words over the years.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think that will help as you talk to more and more men,
Yeah.
right? If you can give a more modern word to bring them in,
Yeah.
and then you can expose them to the bigger concept, because you're
Yeah.
not going to find a modern equivalent that has the same breadth
Hmm.
that temperance would,
Hmm.
right? Balance kind of get, but it doesn't really get
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
So it's a gateway word. There we go.
Right. It's a gateway word. I love that. That's hilarious. Well, and the other thing too is, like, why words are so important in understanding. And this is again why, like, back to that, that lesson that my dad taught me of how prayer is incredibly important and study is incredibly important. Because if I'm not learning, and if you don't like reading, there's audiobooks. That being said, I think you should try to figure out a way to like reading because it's just so important. But words, right? So if you think about love, for example, what the heck is love, right? If you think about it in a secular context, there's a lot of ways to think about it. In a Christian context, it's usually associated with self-sacrifice, and different stuff like that. Another, particularly in the Catholic Church, a definition that's kind of, if there is a definition, because, love is beyond comprehension in some ways, but it's willing the good of the other. And the problem that I have with that in a modern context is, again, when you hear the word will, most people think willpower, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then when you think about love as willing the good of the other or doing what's best for them, really easy to develop a martyr complex where it's like, okay, well, if it hurts, that means it's love. It's like, well, wait a minute. There's a lot of things that hurt that aren't love. And beyond that, it's, love is a choice. Okay, I agree with that. But to say that it's merely a choice loses so much of it. And so that's why I think it's, if you think about will as in what you're motivated to and drawn to based on reason, that means that it's actually receptive in some way. Because if you think about how to satisfy any appetite, it's receptive. If you're hungry, you receive food, right? If you are blind, you receive sight. It's like all of your senses are receptive, and that is so important when it comes to love. Is that it's actually first and foremost total reception of the other, right? And then as a response to that, you see how good they are, and then that motivates you to give of self to the other person. So if you don't see the goodness in the other person first and foremost, well, then you're not going to want to give of yourself. So for guys that are struggling to sacrifice and whatnot, maybe it's because you're not totally, we'll say in love with your spouse. Maybe actually you need to get to know your spouse more. Maybe you need to receive them better, and understand who they are more. And that's even why I said earlier, it's like, know yourself and know your spouse. Because if you can do that, you can't not love them, because each person has, has infinite worth and dignity. So if you really get to know the person, especially someone that you married, you can't help but love them. And when that happens, then that's when you want to give of yourself to that person.
Matt, we got to start wrapping this up. If we pique someone's interest, right? If guys are listening and they want to go deeper on this, where's the best place to connect with you?
Yeah. So steadfastlife.net is my website. Literally put that in the browser. First thing you'll see a free call, discovery call button or whatever. That's right to my calendar, so you can grab a spot. There's also my email on the bottom of the website, but that's super cool. Great way. I'm on LinkedIn too. I've been really political lately, but it's whatever. Yeah, it's probably the best way. You can email me if you don't want to, if you're ask questions, or you can also just grab a slot on my calendar. In the near future, I'm going to be putting more content out there on my website about the virtues, about, relationships and all that kind of stuff. So stay tuned for that too.
Matt, we've covered a lot of ground today. If our listeners heard nothing else, what do you want them to take away from this?
That's a fat question. I would say pursue the good and treat life and family like school, where you recognize that you don't know everything and that it's about learning and it's about enjoying the experience, if you will. So pursue the good and be open to what the good actually is and not just what you think it is.
Guys, for myself and Matt, thanks for joining us today on the Dad Hat Shenanigans podcast, a community of dads just navigating life challenges together. Until next time, laugh, learn, and live the dad life.